I'm very happy to be here, and I welcome you all with love and joy and peace, which is the result of eating this way also. I want to thank the whole community, the Real Truth About Health community, because I know this is a lot of work. And I really appreciate it because this is an important message to get out to the world. So thank you. Okay, good. Now, live food is a blast. And when we're on that way of life for a while, we get more energy and more strength. And what I'd like to do is there's a certain amount of spiritual joy that goes along with it. And so I'm asking you to join me in about 3 minutes of dancing. And let's just start with a lot of spiritual joy. So I'm just going to get ready. This is the Milo Croft Band from Slovakia. And then the picture should have me dancing. So let's.
Champs-Élysées à Paris. Mon joli
So you have the picture of me dancing.
Champs-Élysées à Paris.
Dr. Cousin, we see you.
Good, I know.
Beau Paris. Paríž, úžasný, veríš, v ňom na sny Paríž nepovie nie. Scéna je zvodná žena, nevhodná téma pre svedomie. Paríž v jazyku skrýva erotiku, aj preto ho milujem. Krásna parížské básne a doma žasnem. Paris, je t'aime. Champs-Élysées à Paris. Mon joli, mon beau Paris. Champs-Élysées à Paris. Mon joli, mon beau
Paríž, tam sa len bavíš, všetko, čo spravíš, je kabaret.
Paríž je božský, parížské bosky. Paríž je mesto hviezd.
Vášeň ma zmáha, tančím a padám, kankán, ja zviesť ťa chcem.
Svetlá a roby z vodných hlas módy volám. Paríž, je t'aime. Champs-Élysées à Paris.
Mon joli, mon beau
Paris. Champs-Élysées à Paris. Mon joli, mon beau Paris.
Okay. One second here. So I'm actually really happy to share a little dancing. I really got into dancing when I was at Columbia Medical School, and I used to live in Central Harlem, and I would go to a dance hall called Big Old Small on 137th. Well, not 137th, on 7th Avenue, right near 137th. And it was a lot of fun dancing. And dancing is really good for the soul. And eating live food is really good for the soul. And having enough energy is really good for the soul to be able to dance. One of the advantages of a live food diet and lifestyle is you have energy. My chronological age is 78. It's like, wow. It just, with age, you can really increase in strength and quickness and clarity and endurance. If you choose, that's one of the beauties of live food. So now we're going to go into the slideshow. And here we go. So it's the Tree of Life Foundation. We're an educational organization. And I'm trying to see how to work the movement. And I think actually you may have to do it because it's not moving on my end. Okay. So if we could, there we go. Okay, so that's me. I do a few different things. This is a really, really important slide because it's, can we back up? It's going a little fast. Yeah. When health is absent, we don't have enough energy to make our mind work right. Just look around, okay, at the world today. Look around the United States. Where's the wisdom that used to be here? What are people's thinking processes going on? You can see on junk food, on inorganic food, on food that isn't really live and vibrant, people's consciousness goes down. And it's pretty much proven. There was a study out in Wisconsin where they fed the kids away from the junk food, just organic food, and their grades and their social activity, the way they interacted, all improved. Even school attendance improved. It does make a difference. So wisdom can not really reveal itself if your mind isn't working right. The creativity of art doesn't really happen. Strength can't fight. And let me explain. When I say strength, I mean strength. When I was captain of an undefeated Amherst College football team, I could do 70 push-ups. And that was like 20. I was 20 years old. Here we are 58 years later. And this morning I did 1,350 push-ups. All at one time, 1,350 push-ups. How can that be? You're supposed to get weaker with age. No, that's not true. We have a possibility, the potential, they get stronger and more flexible. And I'm on a 99% live food diet, vegan, obviously, and it makes a difference. And really, if you aren't healthy, what good is wealth? Okay. And if your mind isn't working right because you don't have the right nutrients and your neurotransmitters aren't in balance, intelligence can't be applied. So the next slide, please. So this is me at actually 78 years old. And this is my wife and I just playing around. Next slide. Now, actually, I have 14 books out. My latest book is, can we go a little slower? Can you back that up, please? My latest book is Into the Nothing. And I'll try and show it to you right now. Into the Nothing. It's a spiritual autobiography. And now, which is good, I think I'm in charge here. Maybe, not quite. Okay, so we're just going to try and back it up. Okay, good. Now, And I'm glad everybody likes my new book because it's the spiritual autobiography. It's really a wild spiritual awakening. Every opportunity, every experience can be turned into a spiritual experience, a way to elevate yourself consciously. And now, next slide. Good. Now, here we go into the basis of this. And God said, behold, I've given you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the earth, and every tree that's seed-bearing fruit. It shall be to you for food. This is very uncomplicated. But over time, we've made it more and more complicated. But we're going back to the uncomplicated. Okay. So live food is not a new idea. It's the Genesis diet. Somebody lost the audio. Okay, but the Genesis diet. Let's go back again. One more second. Can we go back one slide? Let's see what we can do. So we have the Genesis diet, and then we have the Pelagasians, who were 100% live fooders. They lived to an average age of 200. And then after that, we have the Egyptians, who were on live food, particularly the priest class, and this is 1300 BC. Akhenaten and Nefertiti. And then after that, we kind of move away from some of these things. If we could get the next slide, or go back one, please. And there we go. Thank you. Then we have the Essenes. Now, they emerged around 500 BC. That's the first real notice we had about them. So what do we know about them? Pythagoras studied with them around that time, 550 BC, and he came down 100% live fooder and began spreading the message all over the world. He came down from Mount Carmel. I happened to be living in Israel, maybe 20 minutes from where that took place. So the Essene movement then spread throughout the Middle East, and the inner core were live fooders, and they did live a long time. They were healthy, and they gave a lot to the world around them. And then Pythagoras became the world teacher of live food, and the Greek culture really blossomed from him. And then it all got lost to a certain extent after the Romans came in and kind of destroyed the Essene communities and lost for a long time until about the 1880s, when Dr. Bertrand Brenner in Switzerland, they began to explore the live food. And then Max Gerson in the 1920s used live food to heal diabetes. It wasn't my idea about using live food to heal diabetes. It was Max Gerson, and healed Albert Schweitzer of type 2 diabetes. I took a clue from that, and basically in 3 weeks, we're healing 61% of the people who participate in our 3-week program. It's pretty exciting. Okay, so Max Gerson, of course, he did a lot of work with healing of cancer as well. And Dr. Edmund Bardot-Sekeli in 1930s really promoted the live food. And then we have Ann Wigmore, who everyone's heard about, and kind of the latest round, Victor Kovinskis, Brian Clement, and myself are bringing this forward in a different way. So my work has been more around the world. Obviously, it's been in the US, but I've lectured on live foods in over 40 countries. We have live food communities. We have, in Africa, we have organic farming going on. Just in Cameroon alone, there's 25 different organic farms. So it's a movement that's more than catching on because it's a healthy way to be. And now we do the next slide. And this is Akhenaten and Nefertiti that we just discussed. And now the next slide. Now, Thomas Edison, very important message. The chief function of the body is to carry the brain around. One of the things I've noticed, I work with a lot of people in a lot of different ways as a psychiatrist, helping people come off post-drug, and that's still happening, whether it's marijuana to ayahuasca, LSD, I've been doing this since the 60s, is that the neurotransmitters of the brain get disorganized. And I discovered that a live food diet is a very powerful way to naturally bring the neurotransmitters back into a healthy balance, which is key to be able to heal from the disruptions that happen when people are doing the different things that disrupt the brain. So I want to say that the live food is really important. I also discovered in my book, Depression Free for Life, that when I put people on a live food diet, it had a very specific antidepressant effect. And as you're going to see a little bit later, a 400% improvement or decrease in depression when people are on live food. So it really makes a difference to have a working brain and a brain where the neurotransmitters are in balance. And a live food diet naturally does that. So I want to emphasize, I've been doing this for years, and it's a really important point that we don't talk about too much. It is really good, just to be redundant, for rebalancing naturally the neurotransmitters of the brain, and then the brain begins to work right, and depression, anxiety, things like that go away. So Thomas Edison had it right. Next slide, please. So what I'm saying is diet affects consciousness. Okay, it affects the mind, it affects thoughts, it affects our action. So if our mind is clear, then our actions come through in a harmonious and clear and loving way. Even if we're disagreeing, I can still be clear and loving. So to have a properly functioning brain where your mind is balanced and your thoughts are balanced is extremely important. And I know today, more than any time in my memory in the last 78 years, people's minds are not working as well. And we can see it, the way people are acting out there, and also the way people's consciousness is being affected by the media. When your mind is clear, you're far less likely to be controlled by the media mind controlling matrix. Because with veganism and with live food, there's much more sovereignty. Very important principle at this time in history. Next slide, please. So, in the big picture, food's a love note from God. And it's important to appreciate that. It's a love note. It's like, thank you. Thank you. So it's a gratitude for the food as well. Next slide, please. So we've done research in a variety of ways and with the master students, and this is some of the results of the research, is that when people went on a minimum of an 80% live food diet for 2 years, okay, and let me clarify. If you're going to go 100% live food diet, usually in 3 months, you're going to see these changes. But in 2 years at 80%. So the question got to me the other day, people said, well, what's the difference? Well, 80% live food over time will give you the results that you get on a live food diet, 100% live food diet, in a shorter time, in 3 months. So what's noted here, important, just what I've been talking about, not an accident, right? I wrote the lecture, okay? There's an improvement in the emotional balance, in the mental clarity and spiritual inspiration. So that's an important thing. Now, in another study, which I did, I found that when people went on to a minimum of an 80% live food, 100% vegan diet, there was a 95% increase in spiritual interest. People got more interested in spiritual life. Now, as I mentioned before, 400% decrease in depression. The neurotransmitters are coming into balance, your whole physiology is working better, and you feel better. 300% decrease in anxiety. 32% decrease in addiction, which actually I think is a low percentage number, but this is presenting someone's research. So a 300% increase in reporting good to excellent energy levels. And we talked about energy, and it is very significant. A lot of people, if you don't have energy to think or move around or feel alive, because we're talking about aliveness now, life isn't very much fun. Not at all. So this increase in energy is something you really do get with live foods, and 92% improvement in the immune system, which I think may be actually low. I think it's probably more than 100% improvement in the immune system, which of course in today's world is a pretty important thing. It's our main defense against viruses and things like that. Next slide, please. And decrease in chronic disease, 68%, and a 200% increase in Menses comfort. The person that did this research actually started out focusing on Menses, and then under kind of supervision, she kind of broadened it. And so it is very common for women who go on to the live food vegan diet that Menses is shorter and not as big a flow and far more comfortable. It's not 100%, nothing here is 100%, but it's significant, that finding. And 245% decrease in constipation. Live food goes through the system a lot quicker than cooked food. Therefore, you don't need so much laxatives or antacids. Your senses get more active. Now, Dr. Breckman did some very well-defined research, showed using mice a 200% increase in energy levels. And what he found is that basically he had them in the little wheel and they had them swimming. And so it wasn't dealing with humans in a like psychosomatic level. It was, here's a mouse, it's not really caring, it's getting food and it's getting more energy. Next slide, please. So why? So live foods, from an ecological point of view, are an unbroken wholeness. Just think about it that way, an unbroken wholeness. So there's a certain power in all that. Now you can see here on the slide, there's that pale green there, and there's a vibrant looking bluish with lots of light color. This is a cabbage leaf. No. One is cooked, the one on top is cooked, and the other one below is raw. There's an obvious difference in the energy field. Now, Dr. Fritz Popp talked about it slightly differently. He's from Germany, I believe he's still alive, and he talks about biophotons. So if you see those little sparks of light kind of coming out of that cabbage leaf, we're looking at energy. And what he found is people who were eating junk food had about 1,000 biophotons per square centimeter. People who were eating basically cooked but organic food had about 23,000. A newborn baby had 33,000 biophotons. And a person who was a live fooder had 83,000 biophotons. And if they added a few Chinese longevity herbs, which won't be really our topic today, but it's really makes a difference, it was up to about 118,000. So 83,000 versus 1,000, 83 times more energy and life force in the live food. Well documented in a unique way. And I used the concept I first introduced in 1986, which is subtle organizing energy field. These are the fields that surround, like our organs, for example, or our cells, or the DNA, all of the above. And the more organizing energy, subtle organizing energy field, the more defined the DNA is, or the cell is, the better it functions. That's the key concept here. So the live food improves DNA, cell, organ, and overall body function because the whole system is more organized. The field of organization is more organized. So think about that for a moment. That's why you get better thinking. That's why you get more strength, because everything is working better and it's more organized, more focused. Next slide, please. Now, Dr. Steven Spindler made an interesting discovery. He found that when he reduced the calories by 40%, there was a 400% increase in the DNA for longevity and well-being and anti-diabetes. In other words, it upgraded the DNA. So what you're hearing is two statements. Less food, you upgrade the function of the DNA, and by what you eat, you can affect the function of the DNA. And both of them are important when we think about live food. We're actually increasing our DNA function, and we're literally upgrading what we call the epigenetic organization. So when we do live food, we actually can eat half as much. I actually, at this point, just have one meal a day, which is a big salad, usually around 2 o'clock, something like that. And just a little bit of cacao in the morning with, a drink. That's it. So you don't need much, and my weight stays stable. Strength continues to grow, but weight stays stable. So that's what we can do. Now, part of it is the membrane potential. Like each cell is a battery. Just think about that. So when you're eating live food, you're taking the highest concentration of electrons into your body. That concentration of electrons comes from the food, without going into the biochemistry, into the cells and improves each cell as a battery. And with live food, we have the best battery charge. Literally, I mean, that's been tested, okay? It's not like a metaphor. It's the best battery charge. And Dr. Hans Eppinger, did a lot of work in testing the cell as a battery. And along with that, as I mentioned, genetic upgrade was researched by Dr. Werner Kolla from Sweden. And he again found we get optimum, we begin to optimize the gene expression on a live food diet, which is exactly what I've been saying here. So we are literally upgrading the function of our DNA, the epigenetic power of our DNA. So we're getting a higher function on multiple levels. Next slide, please. And one thing gets a little overemphasized, enzyme preservation. The research was done in the 1930s, something like that. And it really wasn't the highest quality of research. And I can't tell you that there's that much difference. I had a master's student actually check this out. And what really The only difference was in terms of enzyme, whether it's cooked or not, was with junk food. They had the lowest amount of enzyme. So I bring it up only to say, I don't think it's one of the better ways to say one of the advantages of live food is enzyme preservation. It doesn't seem to be the case. Now, raw food is alkalizing and mineralizing, and most people are acidic, so fine. This starts to make that correction naturally. Zeta potential has to do with the surface tension of the water in our cells. The higher the zeta potential, the healthier our cells are. Now, I mentioned before with live food that constipation is greatly reduced. So it decreases the bowel toxicity because it takes 24 to 36 hours to get through the colon versus 40 to 100 hours with cooked food. Does make a difference, and that's important. Now, when we cook carbohydrates and make acrylide, and that has been shown to be potentially cancer producing. So just make a note about questions. We're going to leave time at the end, at least a half hour for questions. So I'm going to answer your questions, then that way I can get the flow and kind of go through, because I found that a more effective way to do that. Now, next slide, please. Okay, next slide after this. Okay, so this is what a lemon looks like. That's raw. You see the energy coming out. We are eating that energy. That's what's so beautiful. Next slide, please. This is a sprout. Okay, it's beautiful. Next slide, please. And this is a corn sprout. You see the energy that's there. Next slide. This is Carillion photography. This is cacao. Now, I could speak for the next 2 hours on cacao, but what I do want to say is cacao improves heart function, brain function, general energy. It decreases the rate of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, by 14%. So I really like cacao a lot as something that's good. Now, not with a lot of sugar, obviously, for diabetes. Next slide, please. And this is a picture, and it's kind of interesting that you see it's the same person. One, it almost nothing there. They're eating junk food, and this one, they're eating basically organic food. Next slide, please. And this is, we are beings of light, and this white light here is the pineal gland shining. Next slide. And that's pituitary gland shining. Next slide. And next slide after this is epinephrine. So it's wound like Kundalini 3.5 times, a lot of energy. Next slide. And this is testosterone. Next slide. Estrogen, a little bit rounder. So this is crystallography. So we're seeing things that have frequencies and vibrations. Next slide. It's very important to stay hydrated, okay? And proper hydration means you need to be urinating every 1.5 hours to every 2 hours. And it's a measure. With chronological age, we have to pay more attention to that, because as I speak a little bit further down in the talk, I'm going to talk about Kapha, Pitta, Vata. And above 60, we tend to move into what we call Vata. And so it's extremely important to stay hydrated. And a way of testing it is you need to urinate every 1.5 hours to 2. So you just got to listen in an unusual way. Now, one of the reasons I got involved in nutrition was spiritual. In fact, it was the primary reason. In 1975, in a very deep awakening, the awakening of Kundalini energy, which is the tremendous life force, spiritual energy that's in the body, stored at the base of the spine, connects to the cosmic energy. I received this awakening from Swami Muktananda, and I actually saw everything this picture is here, and it's part of the work I do because he has empowered me to awaken this Kundalini energy. Once it's awakened, it takes us to the next level of spiritual life and ultimately to liberation. Now, when I came down from this incredible experience into the nothing, a little voice rang out and said, you should learn to eat in a way that supports the flow of the Kundalini. That's how I got involved in live food. Just think about that for a second. That's not the usual approach. So what I discovered, and I was working literally with thousands of people, both in the US and in India. And I found that when people focused on a vegan diet primarily and then live food, which you had to do more in US than in India because raw food in India is problematic. There was a much greater flow of the Kundalini. What I found is that milk, meat, fish, chicken, all kinds of dairy acted as a sludge to the flow of the Kundalini. Now, you see the two snakes there. They kind of make a heart. These are the Ida Pingala and the central channel, the Sushumna. Now, the flow of the energy goes through those. And a vegan live food diet is by far the best diet for transforming a person into being a superconductor of the divine energies. And these are the divine energies that are stored within us. So that's where that statement comes from. And it activates the chakra system. It activates what we call the layers of the mind, the koshas. The important thing is you can't eat your way to God. That's important. But a live food vegan diet is the most powerful diet for supporting your spiritual unfoldment. And that's the key here in understanding the process. So that's actually how I arrived at that, and how I wrote my first book, Spiritual Nutrition and the Rainbow Diet, was seeing that's the best diet for spiritual life. And that's, of course, the topic of spiritual nutrition, right? Obviously, how to eat in a way to become a superconductor of the divine. So these channels that you're seeing are where the subtle Kundalini life force, spiritual life force energy flows. And the diet opens up the channels. And also when you're eating meat, fish, chicken, and dairy, those animals that have been killed or are milked against their will, there's a lot of pain and misery. And that gets taken into actually our subtle body systems. So the vegan live food diet is pain-free. No animals are suffering. It's back to the original, right? Gan Eden diet. That's what we're looking at here. And again, it's the best diet for spiritual life. Next slide, please. So one of the things that this diet does is it builds into what we call Ojas, the Ayurvedic system, and in the Chinese system we call it Jing, okay? Jing. it's the deep primordial reserve. And a lot of people these days have used up their ojas from a variety of things, just living in the world, so to speak. So this, with the right foods, can build the ojas. Next slide, please. And what depletes it, we can see overworking, overplaying, not getting enough sleep is a big one. Drug use deranges what we call prana, the kind of breath life force, tejas, the fire that we have. So what's really good for building the ojas is omega-3s, and that's the long chain omega-3s, particularly DHA, and we'll be talking about that later. But you can get that from yellow algae. You don't need to get it from fish, which is really EPA primarily. Plant-based protein is very good. Bee pollen, although some people have a vegan that may not be considered vegan. Blue-green algae, chlorella, spirulina, these are high quality proteins. Coconut oil, hemp seeds, avocado, nut and seed milks. So we need a certain amount of fat, and I'll be discussing that a little bit later, but these are really key. And obviously this is ojas, okay? Now the leafy greens build the tejas, the fire, and they have the detoxing part. What are good herbs? We're not going to spend a lot of time on herbs, is the shatavari and ginseng, maca. These all build life force. They're all longevity herbs. Rhodiola, goji berries, astragalus, reishi, schizandra, and gynostemnia. They're all excellent herbs that really take your life force. When I talked about the biophoton energy, these are the key herbs that do that. Next slide, please. So, what about the vegan live food diet? One of the things we've observed is that in the diet today, the germ cell vitality is going lower and lower. And it's actually at a point where we may not be able to reproduce. Now, many things are going on, and I want to kind of separate it from the whole injection vaccine thing that we're going on, because that specifically goes against the germ cell. I wanted to stay with the diet here. And pesticides, herbicides definitely diminish germ cell function. Now, why is that important in this discussion? Because meat, fish, chicken, dairy all concentrate the pesticides and herbicides. So around 95%, 96% of all the pesticides, herbicides in our food are higher in the food chain: meat, fish, chicken, dairy. That's why it's important. So as a live food vegan, you're eating lower on the food chain. It makes perfect sense. So we preserve our germ cell from all the heavy pesticide and herbicide production. And then it allows for healthy reproduction. It may be, if things go as they are, I'm restraining myself from talking about the vaccine. I'm just going to say, I find that not everybody, but a lot of vegans know this is not so good, plus all the 78 different animal DNAs that are in it and so forth and so on. So by avoiding the injection, you are going to have more reproductive viability. So just think about it that way. I'm trying not to make a political statement so much as a health statement. And so your viability is important. I won't go into all of it, but also it's not just the sperm, but it's also the ability of the fetus to connect to the placenta. All this is in the research already. It's out there. So these are really important. So eat low in the food chain. You're going to have much more germ cells, sperm and ova viability. Without that, you can't really reproduce. And again, I'm going to say in the men, the sperm counts have dropped dramatically. They're like less than 50% of what they used to be. I mean, they're at 50% or less than what it used to be 25 years ago. Almost at the point where there isn't really reproduction. I'd love someone to do a study of vegan men versus men in general to see the difference in sperm. I think that would be very illuminating. And maybe in time we can support that, but it would be a really, really positive thing. It's just simple. Sperm count for vegans, 1,000 vegan sperm count for 1,000 men out at large. Okay. You'd have to do vaccinated, unvaccinated to kind of, so you get clear results because of other things. Not obviously, a live food vegan diet preserves, but really activates personal health and vitality, activates it, improves it. Now, we can go into a long talk about it, but we're going to say that this kind of approach, you're going to get 3.5 times less breast cancer and 3.6 times less prostate cancer, at least half the amount of cancer in general. You're going to get, in terms of diabetes, a live food a person who's eating meat has 35 to 50% more type 2 diabetes. The rates of cancer, again, range 2 to 3 times more. Rates of heart disease, maybe 30% less if you're not eating meat. So it goes, the health ramifications are huge, and I'm just going to take it just to that point. It does make a huge difference, and people actually live longer on a vegan diet, and I'm going to say are more healthy. Now, feeds the hungry. If the whole world were vegan, we'd be able to feed the world 7 times over. Think about that. We're worried about food shortages. And part of my work in Africa is we're helping people more convert to a vegan way of dietary way, because we can feed everybody doing that. That's of great value when they're trying to push this starvation. People can grow their food and gives them control over their life in a different way. Obviously, it protects against animal cruelty because you're not killing the animals, and they're not stuck in feedlots and production situations where the cows are nothing more than a product. Okay, and it preserves the ecology, and it protects against global warming. Actually, it preserves the ecology, preserves the water. A vegan saves one swimming pool, Olympic-sized swimming pool of water each year. It preserves the land. It purifies the air. It just goes on and on. I'm not going to give you all the details because it's important. Okay. Maintains and protects the biocomputer mind. I was just looking at the note there. Live food, raw food, what's the difference? Live food is freshly picked after 24 hours to maybe 48 hours, depending on it. It begins to lose its life force value. So if it's around for more than 3 days, it's really, it doesn't have that powerful life force value. So raw is after 3 days. That's maybe an easy way of defining that. Okay, I've already mentioned that it protects the mind, and that's extremely important. Next slide, please. Okay, and that brings us to the consciousness of sovereignty. I haven't actually taken a survey, but my experience has been that the people who are maintaining their personal and, let's say, political sovereignty, there's a higher percentage of vegans and live fooders doing that. Uh, that's a speculation. That'd be a great study to see how that is. And when you're doing the live food, the yama niyamas or the 10 speakings are naturally fulfilled. Ahimsa, no violence, okay? And then inner peace. And then I mentioned about nadis and koshas. Nadis are the channels that you saw. Koshas are the layers of the mind, the 5 layers of the mind. They all are protected and more purified on a live food vegan diet. So that's why it's a diet that's most associated with spirituality. It's very straightforward. Next slide, please. And this is the point. It's not about moral superiority, okay? It's just about being responsible for one's actions and eating in a way that elevates you physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Next slide, please. So people have heard about all the dangers of live food, and we talk about yin qi deficiency. Next slide, please. Spleen qi deficiency. Now, it's a myth. So let me show you how much myth it is. Next slide, please. So spleen qi deficiency syndrome in Chinese medicine, you're going to have digestive weakness, blood sugar imbalances, weight problems, obesity, alcohol, drug abuse, low vitality, chronic fatigue. Okay, that's classic. Now, next slide, please. Strong spleen qi, good energy, endurance, ability to grow, learn, good memory, emotional balance. That's what you get on a live food vegan diet. It's just the opposite of what people are claiming. Some of the reasons why in the old Chinese medicine, like the 1930s, is that the people who were vegan actually didn't have much food choices and options. They were eating white rice. So that's a little bit where that comes from. And then it's just kept as a belief system, ignoring the amazing advances we have in production, quality of food, and what we as Westerners have available to us. Because we do get the good energy, endurance, ability to grow, learn, good memory. That's a sign of the live food. Next slide, please. So it's a cure, not a cause. Next slide. So this is one that's extremely important to think about. Live foods create a Vata imbalance. Next slide. So we have what we call in Ayurveda Kapha, Pitta, Vata. And Vatas are dietarily are people that are thrown out of balance with just salads. And Vata is like air imbalance. You're easily thrown out of balance. Your energy is very sporadic. You may be creative, poetic, but your endurance is poor and so forth. Tall and thin is the physical body. So on my approach, applying the Ayurvedic understanding, Vatas, and everybody with age becomes more Vata, okay, which I was just talking about, right? We can have the full range of everything, except how do we make it work? Because my approach is, how do we make it work? So people need, who are about the high oil content, foods like avocados, nuts and seeds, soaked nuts and seeds, not the dry nuts and seeds, because they create too much air or Vata imbalance. So what else do Vata people need? They need warm, oily, sweet, salty, watery, soupy cuisine. When you do that, you can have live foods at any age. You're not affected by in the Vata zone of your life cycle. That's the point. And then use a certain amount of spices, asafoetida, cumin, ginger, and garlic. They all really help give a certain zing to your food, which is important. So key is the Ayurvedic saying, oh, people who are, if you're doing live food, you're going to get a Vata derangement. Not true. If you're just going to eat salads without oil, nuts, seeds, avocados, yeah, it is true. You aren't going to do warm, oily, sweet, salty, watery, soupy cuisine. Yeah, it is true. But that's the point is we have a brain here, we can use it, and we don't have to do the thing that imbalances it. That's my point. Next slide, please. So that's the point, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Society's always taken by surprise by any new example of common sense. And all I'm doing is sharing you some common sense way of looking at things. Thank you, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Right on. Okay, next slide, please. Now, one of the things that people worry about is, oh, well, I'm a vegan. I'm not going to get enough B12 or DNA, DHA. Not true. Meat eaters and vegans, live food vegans, are all deficient in DHE. We do need to take a supplement of that. And remember, I said meat eaters as well, okay? Because you don't eat that much fish. Anyway, fish are pretty toxic at this point. So yellow algae are where the fish get the long chain omega-3s. And we can get yellow algae extracts. And that does make a difference. 80% of the population in general, vegan or meat eaters, is low in magnesium. Again, by eating the leafy greens, we're going to do much better with that than meat eaters. Iodine deficiency, a huge problem. 75 to 95% of people are deficient in iodine. To get the level you need, without going into a lot of detail, you do need to have a supplement. The soils are too deficient, the animals are too deficient. That's an important thing. You need a supplement. I use a particular supplement called Illuminine. It's scalar wave activated. That's another discussion. Very powerful and is very powerful against prions and viruses, incidentally, as well as bacteria and fungi. Now, the B12 issue is what people get on, and we need to really understand that 40% of meat eaters and 80% of vegans are deficient at the minimum of 200 nanograms of what we need. That's the minimum we need. Now, let's go to the optimum of what we need. 80% of meat eaters, 90% of vegans are deficient at the optimal levels of 400 to 450 nanograms of human active B12. Now, when I say human active, this is important because a lot of the blood tests are not testing for human active. The only really way of doing that is a urine test and for B12, and that will tell you if you're putting out human active B12, if you have sufficient. So both meat eaters and vegan live fooders generally are going to run deficient. And we're talking at the real high levels of B12 at the 400 to 450, 80%, 90%. So that's a high percentage either way. So we all need a supplement of human active B12. And that's what I write in my book, Conscious Eating, as well. Next slide, please. Now, generally, people since 1936 are deficient in minerals. So how do we get minerals in a simple way without taking a supplement is to have full salt. Now, what do I mean by salt? Sodium chloride, which everybody rightly so is saying is not good for you, that's not what I'm talking about. Salt has at least 82 minerals and it's fully activated. Usually you want it mined out of the earth. So it has the earth energies in it. So we need a certain amount of salt. As we know, as we hear with the COVID thing, 85% of Americans are low in vitamin D. That's 30 milligrams, anything less than that. But really, we want to be around 60 to 80. I have generally found, clinically speaking, that most people need a vitamin D supplement And there are vegan supplements out there, from mushrooms and so forth. Next slide. Vitamin K is another one. Again, the vegans are going to do much better, but vegans and meat eaters are low in vitamin K. Also, the vitamin A. A lot of people can't convert the beta carotenes, that's the vegan vitamin A, into active vitamin A. And really, as I point here, 27 to 45% only get a 9% conversion. I do recommend, as the only kind of supplement here, is the vitamin A, vegan vitamin A as a supplement. I haven't been able to solve it like I have with the others. Next slide, please. So let's look at cuisine, which is a little different than diet. Cuisine is a style. We have a vegan or Cajun or Cantonese or a vegan live food cuisine. Those are cuisines. Now, the key is macronutrient ratio. That's really the important thing. So let's talk about that for a moment. Next slide, please. So part of this whole thing that I'm talking about is we have to apply a certain level of intelligence to our diet. Next slide. So we are different. We are not a bunch of cows. So in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, June 2013, it's titled Genome-Wide Meta-Analysis Shows Common Genetic Variants Associated with Macronutrient Intake. What does that mean? Well, first, we've got to study. That's what it means. We got some science behind it. It means people are different. People need a different ratio of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. That's what it means. And to be successful, and 99% of the people I work with who follow my approach are successful vegans, are successful live food vegans, because they include how to individualize the diet. So important here. Okay, so what they found is on chromosome 19, there's a locus which tells you how much fat, how much carbohydrate, and how much protein you need. Think about that. So there's not one diet for everybody. And part of the work of being successful with this, which is what we're talking about, we want to be successful, not theoretical, is finding out how much fat, protein, and carbohydrate you need. Next slide, please. And part of that, this is the Ayurvedic scheme that I talked about. So from 0 to 12, pretty much everybody's kapha, watery, a little fat, and so forth. And then the tiger is the very well-built athletic. And then with age, after 60, they say there's kind of a drying of the tissues. Drying of the tissues. Well, and the joints don't do so well, drying the tissues. So that's where you go in to having to urinate every hour and a half or 2 hours, because we don't want our tissues to get dry. Okay, so what do you need as a vata? You need more full salt, meaning 82 mineral salt, like the scalar salts I talked about. But what you also need is have lots and lots of fluid. And how do you know? Easy. Unless you have a kidney problem or a bladder problem, you need to be urinating every hour and a half to 2 hours. That's why we did the little demo for you. Okay? It was a little purposeful, but that's really important. We've got to understand that with the life cycle, our needs change, our physiological needs change. I'll tell you a little story. I started out with the push-ups. In my 60s, I was stuck. I was just stuck in a certain amount of pull-ups, actually. I was at 25 pull-ups. I couldn't do any better. Then I read at the age of 65, you need slightly more protein. So men at the age of 45 have double overall rates of cancer because they're eating too much protein. So I been careful about that, but at 65 or more, you need to increase your protein. I increased my protein intake by 1 tablespoon of blue-green algae. And I went in really 2 to 3 weeks up to 50 pull-ups. Slight change in protein. That's kind of the subtlety we're looking at. We've got to pay attention. And we are the research lab, not some book, not what somebody tells you, except, hey, research it, know yourself. So with Vata, we have to change our diet. Watery, soupy, oily type of diet, which isn't really good if you're a Kapha and you're 10 years old, not so good. Okay, touch of sweet. Well, I don't do too much sweet, but a little bit of something that adds to it. Next slide, please. So let's look at the protein question. Next slide. So genetically, 70% of the population needs higher protein, which we call fast oxidizer, and 30% needs a lower protein. Okay, that's our genetics. So we have to figure out what that is. Now, on my website, I have a sheet that's for free you can do and fill out to see if you're a fast oxidizer or slow oxidizer. I tend to be a slow oxidizer. I don't need a lot of protein. The range, what we call the mTOR pathway, which is 35 to 70 grams of protein a day. That's as much as we need. Most people are having too much protein. Journal of Nutrition saw that vegans got twice as much protein as they need. People are having too much protein. But for longevity and well-being and anti-cancer, we need between 35 and 70 grams. I'm not talking about pregnant women now. Okay. So that's key. For me, as a slow oxidizer, I need, and I probably, are closer to 40 grams of protein a day. Fine, that's what I need. That's where I can optimize. How do you know it works? How's your energy? How's your strength? It's pretty straightforward. We don't have to be a genius to figure out. We just have to ask the questions. So understand we are, again, genetically unique. Next slide, please. So can we get adequate protein? You bet. We don't need, it's easy. Next slide. So we don't want to, so all these vegetables, they're very high in protein. The problem is you have to eat a bushel of them. Next slide. Just to make a point, spinach is 49% protein. Wow. Kale, 45%. Broccoli, 45%. Mushrooms, 38%. Green peppers, 22%. You get the point. Tomatoes, 18%. Now, beef is about 26%. Chickens, 23%. Eggs are 12%. Fishes, somewhere between 25 and 30%. So that food isn't that far off. Next slide, please. So we have tuna, 29% protein, and flounder at 13% protein. So next slide. So the point is we can get enough protein with our nuts and seeds or protein concentrates. I find in my clinical work that if a person's a fast oxidizer, a person needs more protein, they may need a tablespoon or more per meal of a protein concentrate, like a pea protein concentrate, to balance it, okay? And that seems to work really pretty well. And if you're somebody like me, you don't need much because as a slow oxidizer, you need less protein. So nuts and seeds give you that. Next slide. And this is a great study. I'm really fascinated. It was 119,000 people. They're followed for 30 years. So basically, if you just ate nuts occasionally, you have 70% reduced risk of death. Once a week, 11% reduction. 2 to 4 times a week, 13%. And if you eat nuts and seeds like I do every day, okay, unless I'm fasting, right? 20% reduction in death risk. Okay, and it's also eating nuts and seeds is linked to lower rates of cancer, heart disease, respiratory disease, and really diabetes as well. So that kind of lays it out. That's from the New England Journal of Medicine. So nuts and seeds, you're going to live longer and you're going to live more healthy. Next slide, please. And we have lots of protein concentrates there. Next slide. And fat in the diet. Now, we have suffered, I think, a little bit from a scare about fat. Next slide. But keep in mind, human breast milk is 54% saturated fat. Next slide. And what I have found in my research with people is versus the 10% low fat, which I think causes a lot of problems of low cholesterol, which is not good. You need cholesterol to make your brain work. It optimizes mental function. It optimizes overall well-being. It optimizes learning and generally being healthier, because cholesterol is the mother of all hormones. So you see my diet, 25 to 45% fat. Again, this is plant-based fat. It's not fried fat or junk food fat. And 25 to 35% carbs and maybe 10, 15% protein. And look how people did. The triglycerides were way, way, way lower on this approach than the 10% fat. And cholesterol averaged 159 versus other diets. So that's way good. Now, I won't go into the cholesterol too much, just kept to say that the research shows that a cholesterol between 160 and 260, there's no difference in terms of heart disease. That's the important thing. Next slide, please. So this is just one study, and then I'm going to move through the cholesterol studies. So a Norwegian study, 52,000 people, people ages 20 to 74, okay? Big range. That women with a cholesterol of 270 had 28% lower mortality than women with a cholesterol of less than 193. So get it, I said 270, oh, wow, people get scared. No, 270 makes everything work right, and women with that level had 28% less mortality. Next slide, please. We're going to go through some more of these because I've kind of made my statement. So next slide, please. And this is a very important study. It was done in 2009. Keep going. Next slide. And here's what the study shows. There's no evidence to support the widespread, and I'm going to call it mythical belief, that limiting saturated fat intake is beneficial or protective for heart health or longevity. This is the result of 30 years of studies, many, many, many individual studies. Next slide, please. Okay, so, and here I think it's important. It's another one study. It's average age is people 89 years old. Each 39 point increase in total cholesterol decreases your mortality by 15%. So just making the point. Now, there is a problem with low cholesterol. Next slide, please. And next slide. And next slide. And next slide. One more. So what we're saying is if your cholesterol is below 160, we have increased emotional imbalances, increased rates of suicide and depression. I knew that even in Columbia Medical School in the 60s. Violent behavior, stroke, memory loss, hormone imbalances. Low cholesterol is more our threat to our health. So anything below 160 is a little bit of a threat. Next slide, please. Okay, we go ahead and just go through this really quickly. Boom, boom, keep going. Keep going, keep going. This is the omega, long chain omega-3s. Next slide, next slide. Keep going, one more. So carbohydrate in the diet, next slide. So this is a Chinese teaching about live foods. If you mix in smoke and fire, cooking your food, your body will not walk in the jewel pond, which is the liberation. The immortal body should be pure, clear spirit. So if you don't abstain from cooked food, then it becomes murky. And they're saying live food is key to the liberation process. Next slide, please. Okay. And this is about grains. I don't want to spend too much time in grains, but I personally eat very, very little grains. Uh, and this is the Chinese teaching Bigu, avoid eating grains. And this goes back to Tao's teachings 475 BC. Next slide. Okay, and I'm going to point glucose, fructose, they're all not good for you. Next slide. Next 2 or 3 slides. Keep going, bounce through it a little bit. Okay. One more, because I want to show okay, next slide. If you have more fructose, it is not a substitute for glucose. There's a higher rate of insulin resistance, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, heart disease, high blood pressure, obesity, gout, brain inflammation, extremely important, accelerated aging. Next slide. So go low on the fructose. I avoid it, to be honest with you, because most of it's genetically engineered, okay? And we want to avoid inflammation of the brain. All these cause inflammation, and I'll touch on gluten and high carbohydrate diet. They all cause inflammation in the brain. High carbohydrate diet and gluten. Next slide, please. Okay, and blood sugar is a big issue. We want to eat in a way that our blood sugar optimum is 70 to 85, and it tends to increase with age. Last time I checked it with you was about a week ago, it was 81. That's a good range, 70 to 85. Optimum range above 100 is prediabetes. So I watch it very closely. In a few days, we're going to be doing a internet fast. We're not fasting from the internet, but we're fasting on green juices. And we'll see people's blood sugars go way down because we dilute the juices in half. The higher blood sugar, the faster your brain shrinks. Normally, the brain shrinks at 1% per year. I'm not going to, it's a topic that's extremely important, and I've talked a lot about it, but we're not going to talk about it now. Maybe next year, I'll talk about brain shrinkage and how to prevent that. Next slide. Okay, so brain size loss. The higher your A1C, which is your sugar, glucose, or fructose connected to your hemoglobin, the higher rate of brain cell loss. And also the higher rate of depression. Next slide. So inflammatory carbohydrates. Low in healthy fat messes with the mind. David Perlmutter, grain brain. Next slide. Okay, sugar is a problem. We already said it. Next slide. Now, here's the balance I want people to think about. We are unique individuals. We really have to consider that. It's very important. So plant fat, 25 to 45%. Now, I'm a person who needs a little less plant fat and a little less protein and a little bit more carbohydrate. And when I say carbohydrate, I'm talking about leafy greens, okay? That's what carbohydrate is for me. Leafy greens and like what I had for lunch today, bell peppers and avocados, things like that. Well, that's not carbohydrate, but it's that kind of thing. Leafy greens and certain vegetables around that, like bell peppers. Okay, next slide. So how do you know it's working? It's how's your energy? So I've settled in on this diet because I have lots of energy. At 78 years old, it's like energy is just like happening, I explained the push-ups. That's my measure of energy. It's not to brag about, but 1,350 push-ups, not bad, okay? And to be able to dance and move, the energy's there all the time. Then you've got on the right diet. It's real simple. You don't need anyone else to tell you. You have to tell yourself, how's my energy? How's my energy all the time? That's what we have to look at. Next slide, please. So this is the idea. The live food, vegan diet helps you become a superconductor of the divine. It helps you meditate more deeply. It helps the spiritual energy called Kundalini flow. and you literally become a superconductor. Final slide. Here is, in each generation, we're given the right medicine for the world's repair. So the holistic live food veganism is the medicine for healing today's world. It really is the medicine for healing this world. Holistic live food veganism is the wave of the present and of the future on every level. Just think about that, because that's what you're all part of. And I bless you for having the wisdom to be part of that. Next slide. You might feel bad about the state of our world, but it'll be okay because people like you are on it. So I honor every one of you for being courageous and wise enough to look at this way of eating and creating a holistic way of life that helps you wake up to the truth of who you are, which does include meditation, does include exercise, it does include love and relationships. They're all kind of connected in. Next slide. If you want to get hold of me, I'm still actually seeing patients. Here I am in Israel, but I see people obviously over the internet. Doesn't matter because we can't get together. info@treeoflife.edu. That's what we want. That's the easiest. Or you can go to drcousins.com. drcousins.com. That's pretty easy. Next slide. So there we go, holistic health practice, and we're doing a lot of teaching. That's much more what I'm doing. Whole person health evaluation. Next slide. Okay, and you can go to Dr. Cousins. It's not online store. I'm trying to correct this here a little bit. Because we're not doing a store directly. It is Dr. Cousins Global. Okay, drcousinsglobal.com. There we go. So I'm just sharing how to get in touch. Just go to, well, Dr. Cousins, just go to drcousins.com. Easy way, or info@treeoflife.edu. So now we have time for questions and answers.
Dr. Cousins, thank you so much. This has been truly amazing for all of us, and we are so appreciative of everything you've shared. And yes, we're going to bring on some questions, and in order to do that, just want to make sure everybody understands. Here's a little housekeeping on that. So for those of you that have questions, and I see some of you are already doing this, thank you. What we want you to do, we're only able to take questions live. So anything that's in the chat box, we won't be able to answer that. But if you can, go ahead and raise your hand. And how you do that is on your Zoom controls at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see something that says reactions. You click on that reactions tab, and then a little thing in there will say raise hand. You click on raise hand, and we will see your hand raised. And we're going to take each hand raised in the order in which they came. We'll get to as many questions as we possibly can in the amount of time we have left allotted. And we ask that everybody keep their questions brief and direct for Dr. Cousins. And with that, let's jump right in. The first question I have, the first hand raised we have is Alexandra. Alexandra, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yes, I do. Hello. Thank you very much for this really beautiful talk and the informations. I didn't know about Vatas for oil. I just forgot about it and was all on green leaves trip. So I'm grateful for this little extra. My question is with regards to post-viral chronic constitutions, like which I have, chronic fatigue syndrome since some decades. But there's also like post-Epstein-Barr, post-COVID, whatever comes up. I wonder if you have experiences how to, how to not have a crash.
Let me answer your question.
Yes.
I see a lot of people who are post-viral, and we're not just talking COVID, okay? This has been going on for years, okay? The post-viral causes some major problems, particularly the mitochondria are damaged by the virus. I do a lot of work in helping people rebuild their system. It takes a year or two because it's a kind of a deep wound. It is healable. That's all I want you to hear.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
But I have to work with you more in detail. It has to do with somehow the viruses attack the mitochondria in the brain, in the heart, and in the whole body, and your energy just doesn't seem to ever recover, which is
Yeah.
what you were saying. So it is possible. That's the answer. But we have
Very
to
good to know.
mitochondria. Okay?
Thank you.
So you can reach, I'm not looking for clients, but the truth is it's like a specialty because so many people have it. And it goes on for so long. It goes on for years unless you can correct it. And also, I'm going to say one more thing. There's an imbalance of the hypothalamus pituitary pineal gland, very common. And we have to correct that too. All of it's pretty easy. Okay, so just go to info at treeoflife.nu. And where do you live?
Actually, I think Alexandra is muted. Alexandra, if you,
That's fine. It's fine. We can keep going.
that's great. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. Thank you, doctor. So now up next, we have Sophia. Sophia, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Hi, doctor. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your generosity.
I like to do this. It's fun. Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is about hormonal imbalance. For many years, I'm 55 and I have been suffering from hot flushes and few hair growth under my chin. So I wonder if there is a way to get rid of them. Is there a supplement that I can take, a hormonal one, or?
Well, honestly, like I would have mentioned before, the foundation is the live food vegan diet, okay? But these things are very specific. You aren't a cow, okay? So when I work with somebody, I'll spend, and I'm not trying to advertise, I'm just telling you what I do. I'll spend 2.5 hours. I'm going to figure out all the hormonal things that are off, whether it's the thyroid or the pancreas. So there's multiple reasons why what could be happening. Do you understand what I mean? So from a holistic point of view, we have to look at everything at every level. Physical, which is one level, emotional, mental, and also spiritual. So again, I'm really telling you what I do with a deep holistic approach. And we have to look at every organ system, every hormonal glandular system in that process. So,
Great, doctor.
So there's no one thing for everybody. But life is a good start. Okay, next.
Sorry about that. Up next, we have Catherine. Catherine, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself.
Aloha, Dr. Cousins and everybody.
Hello, Catherine. Yeah.
Hi, I love that presentation. And I'm curious to know more about the carbohydrates. I always think of potatoes and carrots, but you were talking about greens. So could you?
I don't have carrots and potatoes. That's why. So leafy greens, all vegetables are primarily not 100%. It's not like bread. It's 100% carbohydrate. But these are very high carbohydrate foods. The leafy greens and pretty much all your vegetables. And then you have your more sweeter vegetables like beets and carrots and so forth. But you have broccoli, you have cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. You have a lot of things. They're all much higher in carbohydrates than we normally think of. That just opened up your dietary cuisine, which is good.
Great. Doctor, up next, we have Joanne. Joanne, if you'd go ahead and unmute, please. We look forward to your question. And Joanne, I think, yep, there we go.
Hi, otherwise known as Yehudis Nahama. Hi, Dr. Cousins.
Hello.
Hi. So I have several things going on, and I'm trying to ask the ones that would be possibly for the highest good of everybody listening, rather than a lot of specific things. I have been a plant-based vegan for many years, probably since I'm about 18 years old, and I grew up on the traditional Jewish, meat and potatoes and stuff like that. But anyway, now I'm having challenges with, for one thing, this has been going on since I became vegan. I'm cold. Like right now, as I speak to you, it's 71 degrees in my room. My hands are ice cold. My toes are ice cold. I go to the ocean, people are wearing shorts and t-shirts, and they look at me like I'm a lunatic because I'm wearing like a winter down coat.
Okay, let me answer your question because it's common, okay? Not that you are common, but your question is, okay? So, because anyone who's choosing to be vegan life food, you're already a unique person. You're already kind of like unique in a good way. Okay, so the answer is, in my clinical experience, low thyroid is a very common result. Everything works well. The only thing it seems to happen that isn't what I like to see is a tendency for low thyroid on the organic, veganic, live food diet. It's pretty easy to treat. And of course, we don't prescribe over the internet like this, but that is totally typical. And you're giving me all the symptoms of low thyroid. Now, the problem we face too is that clinically speaking, you may test normal, but you got the symptoms of low thyroid. And that's the way I approach it, is clinical, because the thyroid tests are notoriously 50% inaccurate. So flip a coin, that's not so good. So really, I think I've answered your question, and those are clear symptoms. And unfortunately, well, fortunately, maybe that's the only main problem with organic, veganic from a health point of view, is the low thyroid is a tendency, and it's easy to treat, but I can't really prescribe it over the internet.
Thank you. Up next,
So no, there's hope. No, there's hope, and it's really easy. Next slide. Next person.
That's encouraging. Thank you. Up next, we have Benny with a question. Benny, if you'd go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, doctor. So fruit, frozen fruit, is that destroy anything? And on the cacao recommendation, beans, nibs versus powder.
Okay, good, Benny. I don't do frozen, okay, because it does break the cell wall, and the best we can tell, it's probably you're losing about 50 to 75% of the nutritional value. It's not like cooking, but you lose a lot of the nutritional value. So I don't do frozen. Now, the cacao, I'm going to talk in tablespoons because the form depends you. So 1 tablespoon of powdered cacao gives you pretty good dose. So, 1 to 3 tablespoons, but 1 tablespoon is the minimum a powdered cacao that you need to get the kind of more optimal effect. And that's probably the best way to do that. I like cacao, and I think it's really good on multiple levels. And I'll put it in a hot drink of some sort, like tea or something like that. So that's probably easiest, and you can figure out the exact form. But 1 tablespoon is the minimum, 750 milligrams. Okay. Good question.
That's great, doctor. Thank you. And up next, we have Stephanie with a question. Stephanie, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Dr. Gabriel.
Hello.
My question is, for someone who is insulin resistant, I have PCOS, and I've been pre-diabetic for many years because of that. I have a Candida albicans overgrowth that's pretty strong, and I have not been able to get rid of it after years and years of trying. Do you have any advice or anything for someone who's trying to get rid of Candida?
Well, I mean, you got a few things going on, right? So I'm going to tell you what is safe and, is actually green juice, 50% diluted, is in general. So I can't really prescribe medications, but generally, and that will also help with prediabetes and maybe sometimes activate your insulin resistant type situation into a good place. So a green juice fast for at least a week may give you some real relief because there's not much sugar. So you dilute the juice in half. That's the way it would go. Besides, I would have to see you personally to get into the details, but as a general broad thing, it's a win-win unless you're 20 pounds underweight, which I don't think is the case. Okay, good.
Great, doctor. Thank you
But
so
no,
much.
there's hope. No, there's hope. Okay, get it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Up next, we have Robin. Robin, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself for Dr. Cousins. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Cousins.
Hello.
What you said about the pain and suffering of animals is something I choose not to ingest, resonated with me. My question for you is, what is the optimal number for LDL? Is the only way to lower LDL with medication? What do you recommend? And is there any connection with LDL and plaque buildup in the carotid arteries?
I don't think there's a connection with the LD and the plaque buildup. I think that the problem is we are unique physiologies, and I don't know if the ranges are all that accurate that they're talking about. That's why I'm hesitant to say there's a particular range. You want to look at the total picture of your lipid profile and see what that looks like. That's kind of why I'm very hesitant to say here's a number, because it's a little complicated and people vary a lot. So what I would say is the more healthy you are, the better it is. And I don't recommend taking any drugs because they cause other imbalances. So if you're doing a live food vegan diet, 80%, and that's what your LDL is, then okay, maybe go to 90% and see if there's a change. But generally speaking, you may want a little bit of shift in your diet. The trouble is we make our own cholesterol, we make our own LDLs. It isn't like so much from the external diet, but that does help a little bit. That's the best I can do on that. Okay, next question.
Thank you. Thank you. Up next, we have Veronica. Veronica, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself for your question for Dr. Cousins.
Hello. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I've been actually following all your books, Conscious Eating and everything for many years. I just want to give a little bit of background information so that you can understand and maybe somebody else can relate. I usually find it really hard to find long-term raw living vegans. I happen to have been raised in Argentina and I'm 52 years old now, but 30 years ago, I left Argentina the moment I turned 21 so that my parents would release me from a mental institution just because I wanted to eat fruits and vegetables. I never heard of a vegetarian, a vegan, or embracing a raw living lifestyle. But the moment I got on that plane, I said, I don't want meat, fish, or chicken. And I went cold turkey, raw vegan ever since. So I've been a raw vegan without any guidance for 30 years, except that then I started reading books and realizing there was a whole movement there. So I have literally worked meticulously on my diet for all that time. I sprout my food. I follow very much what you do and advise. And I don't really know what else to do. I'm also a yoga instructor, so I meditate. I do all the right things in my life. I keep active. And the number one reason I think I was guided to it this way is because I wanted food that gave me energy instead of taking it away from me, that made me open up spiritually and be at the highest level of my optimal physical, emotional, and mental well-being. I'm telling you all this because I find that also as I get older, I need less and less food for more and more energy. However, I'm having a really hard time with a slow transit of food, especially because I turned away from any oils years ago. So my oils come in the form of avocados or nuts and seeds, mostly sprouted. And I bulk up, inflame in my digestion because I have my salad, my big salad with all the nutrients I need, mostly like you, almost eating my big meal once a day. And sincerely, I'm sorry that I have to say this, but the bulk of my stools is almost 30 centimeters long and really wide in diameter. And it takes a lot of pain to go through my colon. Now, there is nothing wrong with me structurally, except I have very intertwining intestines. And now I'm disappointed because even though I do everything right, I'm in pain because it's so hard for me to transit that food.
Okay, so just hold a second. First of all, I have met live food vegans in Buenos Aires. Okay.
30 years ago? Well, when I lived in there,
30 years ago, but 10 or 15. Second, there are some live food people from Argentina.
I live in
the
Canada.
United
I
States.
never went back to Argentina. Sorry, I live in Canada. I never went back to Argentina.
Okay.
So
I was talking about Argentina, but there are people from Argentina, who are live food in the United States. And I think it would be very good for you to try to make contact with some of them so you're not alone. That's all I'm going to suggest. Your problems are complicated and beyond what I can answer in a 30-second answer, except that I think you need some support. And I think connecting to other Argentinians would be good. I know in Florida there's a whole bunch, and many of them have studied with me. And so that is what I would suggest is get connected. And I think there's work to be done, but I can't do it in a 30-second kind of suggestion, except find people who you feel comfortable with who are doing live foods, and then they'll guide you to where you need to go. Next question.
Thank you, Doctor. And with that, we are bringing up Jess. Jess, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, that would be great for Dr. Cousins. Jess, just want to double check. We'll need you to unmute yourself on your end if you can, so we can get your question for Dr. Cousins. Okay, I tell you what we'll do is we'll move on to the next one, and that is Yaron or Yaron. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. If you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, Yaron, for Dr. Cousins. Thank you.
Hi, Doctor. I have two quick questions, please. One with regarding to the cacao and coconut that you were recommending. They have lots of saturated fat. How does it goes with lowering the chance of heart disease? And my second question about the fructose, you say you recommend to avoid is, would you recommend to avoid all types of fruits, or there are some fruits that are okay to eat?
Excellent question. So let's go back to while I answer the fructose thing, the only fructose I recommend is in natural fructose in fruit, and basically the low fructose fruits, bilberries, blueberries, green apples are good places to, that's kind of safe in that way. Okay. And then kind of restate the first question again. I just two words, restate it.
Yeah, sure. So I know that coconut and cacao have lots of saturated fat.
Okay.
Saturated fat
I wasn't talking about coconut. That's why I got thrown off. But yes. And as I point out, that saturated fat has not been proven. In fact, what you saw in my slideshow is a certain amount of saturated fat is not a problem. And I think that's really the answer. Can we say exactly how that much that is? There's a big scare about saturated fat. We need fat. Your brain needs fat. your hormonal system needs fat. And so what I'm saying is a little bit of saturated fat is safe. Obviously, organic, veganic, uncooked, saturated fat. So as long as you're not, I'm going to be vague here, but overdoing it, a little bit of saturated fat, like with cacao or coconut, but not 10 coconuts a day. You want to have a half a coconut, I don't think you're looking at any kind of danger whatsoever. We need saturated fat for our overall metabolism and our brain. Okay, next question.
Great, thank you, Doctor. And we have just a few minutes left. And so let's go ahead and Catherine, if you'd go ahead and unmute, we look forward to your question for Dr. Cousins. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, aloha, Dr. Cousins. I had another question. I really love the Carillion photographs. And I know you talked a little bit about not eating frozen food. I'm guessing you eat dried nuts. And I'm just curious about that loss of life force that you mentioned that, you know, in the first 3 days.
Right.
How do you think that relates in terms of eating dried fruit or dried nuts?
Okay, so it's a good question. When you dehydrate, you lose about 25%. Okay. If things just sit, you're going to lose 25% whenever you're dehydrated. We kind of measured this with Carillion photography, to tell you the truth. That's why I'm saying that with a little bit of confidence, is that we did measure all these different things. The best is dehydration. Okay. I don't really have dried fruit. It's way too sweet, way too concentrated. So that's not part of it. So what I'm saying is a little bit of dehydrated food works pretty well but I don't really focus on dehydrated food. I would say it's a very, very, very small part of my diet. My diet is basically, you know, if we're going to do nuts and seeds, straight nuts and seeds, hydrated, so that you've reactivated the energy of it. So that's more how I do nuts and seeds. I really don't do much with the dehydrated.
Great, Doctor. Thank you.
Less processing, the better is really what I'm saying. Okay.
That's great. Thank you. And looks like we have time for just one more question. We thank everybody for coming on. Let's go to David. David, if you go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Dr. Cousins. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I had a question you may have addressed since I just joined the call, so please forgive me if you've already addressed it. And that has to do with supplements for vegans, i.e. vitamin D, essential fatty acids, omega-3, algae oil, or vitamin B12. Can you talk about those or any other supplements you recommend for vegans in general?
Here's the key. Meat eaters and vegans all are deficient in those areas. Don't think vegan is something special, and if you're a meat eater, you don't get deficient. Meat eaters and vegans are, you know, are deficient at the optimum for B12 of 400. 80% of vegans and 90% of vegans, 80% of meat eaters are deficient. You're not at that level. Same thing with the omega-3s. About 95% of the total population of the United States is deficient in long-chain omega-3s. So I want people to get away from the idea that there's something deficient about a vegan diet. It's not the case, is what I'm trying to say. Okay? A little less B12 in the diet, fine. Omega-3s, maybe a little bit more. The vitamin D, everyone seems to be deficient, 85% of the population. Everybody needs vitamin D, okay? So that's what I think the important thing is vegans are not a separate class and we're deficient more so than meat eaters. Does that help?
I think it sure does. I think they're muted at this point, but yeah, I think that sure does help.
Important to let go of the concept that I'm vegan, therefore I'm more deficient. I don't think that's the case. Because now it may vary percentage-wise, but mostly what I just said, everyone needs that as a supplement. Everybody needs vitamin C as a supplement. Most people I see, vegan or meat eaters, need some kind of general B vitamins because of all the stress that's going on in the environment. So we are not a separate deficient class. We're just as deficient as everybody else, meat eaters as well. And yes, everyone needs supplements in this day and age with the level of physical, emotional, and psychological and spiritual stress that everyone's undergoing. So I think, is that the last question?
That was it. And that was perfect. And Dr. Cousens, thank you so much for everything and for being so gracious with your time today. We actually are ready for our next lecture. But before we get there,
I want to bless everybody. I want to bless you for your good work. And I want to bless all the listeners for having the spiritual courage to live this lifestyle. And may I bless you all that you be successful in it. Amen. I hope.
Amen. And thank you so much for all of that. And you know what? If our tech team will go ahead and unmute everybody's screens, bravo to you. Thank you so much. We all want to show a level of appreciation. Everybody give Dr. Cousens a great hand.
I bless you too, Dr. Cousens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Cousens.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
You're the best.
Hello.
Thank you very much.
God bless you. The very best.